was the era of the written word, more than 100 years ago, before the radio or the television. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle started writing a series of detective stories in the year 1887. Over 6 years' time, his character, Sherlock Holmes, became so popular that he kind of started probably feeling a little overwhelmed with him. And when he came here in Meiringen and to the Reichenbach Falls, he thought that this was perhaps the perfect setting for him to bring about the final doing away with the character.
The stories of Sherlock Holmes, which used to be published in the Strand magazine, was just one of the many things that Conan Doyle did in his life. In his later years, Conan Doyle once drew a cartoon of himself as an old horse pulling a cart loaded with all his projects. And the Sherlock Holmes stories are just one of the many items. Among his medical practice and many other things that he did, there are 2 real-life criminal cases that he solved: Adalji and Oscar Slater were 2 men who were actually innocent but were thought to be guilty of terrible crimes until Conan Doyle found the real criminals. So, probably it made sense for him to not continue with the stories of Sherlock Holmes. By this time, however, his readers had become very fond of his stories. And it is said that they came out in black bands on the streets upon the supposed death of Sherlock Holmes at the Reichenbach Falls in the story The Final Problem. Conan Doyle tried to assuage his readers by writing a predated story of Holmes, The Hound of the Baskervilles. This went on to become the most famous Sherlock Holmes story of all. And his readers wanted more. And Conan Doyle had to resurrect Holmes back in the story The Empty House. This began a new series of Holmes' stories which continued to grow in popularity. And nowhere, it seems, is Sherlock Holmes so popular as in Meiringen, a pretty little village tucked away in the Swiss Alps. The hotel where Holmes and Watson were to have stayed in The Final Problem is still there, and you can faintly hear the distant Reichenbach. That dreadful cauldron of swirling water and seething foam, into which Holmes and the arch-villain Moriarty are supposed to have fallen to their deaths. In the streets, that well-known profile appears next to local and national flags. Of course, there is a statue, but not only that, there is a small museum entirely about Sherlock Holmes. Among other things inside, you can peek into the study in Baker Street, as if Holmes and Watson have just stepped out. Meiringen also conferred honorary citizenship upon Sherlock Holmes, the only person to ever receive this honor. The most famous person who was ever here was a man who never lived.